In 113 AC, the Regency Council of Aegon III commissioned a survey of the realm. Not a celebration, not a proclamation, a count. They wanted to know what was left. The commissioners who rode out that year into the Crownlands and the Riverlands were experienced administrators. They had managed revenues, adjudicated disputes, assessed damage from floods and famines. None of them, by the accounts that survive, were prepared for what the dance had left behind. What they found was not destruction. Most of the buildings were standing. Most of the roads were passable. What they found was absence. The buildings were standing, and no one was in them. The roads were passable, and no one was using them. The realm was intact. The people were not. The 1332 AC census is the most important document in the scholarship of the dance's aftermath, and one of the most incomplete. It was never finished. In several regions, the commissioners stopped recording before they reached the end of their assigned territory. In others, the records they completed were subsequently lost. What survives is fragmentary, but the fragments are consistent. Village after village in the Riverlands recorded at 30, 40, 50% of its pre-war population, some at less. The census commissioners, who were trying to assess tax capacity, kept noting in the margins things like greatly diminished and many departed, whereabouts unknown.
The 132 AC census is fragmentary. A lot of it was never completed, and a lot of what was completed has not survived. But what we have is striking. The Riverlands returns show village after village at 40, 50, 60% of pre-war population. Some settle at around 30%. The census commissioners, who were trying to assess tax capacity, kept noting in the margins things like greatly diminished and many departed, whereabouts unknown. Those margin notes are some of the most important primary sources I work with. They are the bureaucratic equivalent of a shrug. The record does not know what happened to these people. It only knows that they are not where they were.
We can verify the census numbers in some cases, and contradict them in others. The census measures the living. The archaeological record measures everyone. Some of the sites the census records as greatly diminished show in the material record evidence of communities that did not diminish. They ended. The physical infrastructure was reoccupied later by different people. The original community is simply gone. The census does not record that distinction. A village at 30% of pre-war population and a village that was entirely emptied and then resettled by strangers look identical in the census returns. They are not identical. They are entirely different kinds of loss.
The Regency Council commissioned the census because they needed to know what they were governing. What they found, I think, was that they were governing something that did not yet know what it was. The political structures were intact. Lords, levies, the administrative machinery of the realm. But the populations those structures were designed to govern had been so disrupted that the machinery was running, in many places, without the people it was built to serve. It is the political equivalent of what Tanaka describes in the archaeological record. The structure persists, but what the structure was for is gone.
Not everything the dance damaged was destroyed. Some things survived the physical destruction, but did not survive the loss of the people who ran them, or the loss of the trade relationships that sustained them, or the loss of the collective knowledge and habit that made them function. The dance was not only a war against buildings, it was a war against the invisible architecture, the trust, the practice, the shared obligation that makes a community work. Buildings can be rebuilt. The invisible architecture is harder to account for and harder to restore.
There is a trade route through the Riverlands that I have traced across the pre-war records. A wool and cloth route that connected 3 towns and supported, by my estimate, several hundred families at each end. After the war, the middle town is gone. Not burned, empty. And the route never re-establishes. The geography is still there. The roads are still there. But the network of trust and credit relationships and practice that made the route work, that is gone. Someone would have had to rebuild it from scratch. No one did. At least not within any period the records cover.
The faith of the Seven survived the dance as an institution. Its buildings were intact in most places. Its clergy had continued to function throughout the war, often as the only organised relief presence in areas where all other administrative structures had collapsed. But an institution surviving and a community's relationship with that institution surviving are not the same thing. The dance had made the faith ask questions it could not answer. Whether the people who came back to the septs afterward came changed is one of the things the record cannot easily tell us.
The faith survived. I want to be careful about what I mean by that. The institution survived. The buildings survived. Mostly. The clergy continued. What I cannot tell you, what the confessional records from the post-war period suggest but do not confirm, is whether the faith of ordinary people survived in the same form. There are hints. Attendance records for some septs in the Riverlands show a different pattern in the years after the war. More irregular, more clustered around specific feast days, less of the routine weekly observance that characterized the pre-war period. That could mean many things. One of the things it could mean is that the war changed what people needed the sept to be. I do not know if it gave them what they needed. The record is quiet on that.
There is a question that sits underneath all of the scholarship on the Dance of Dragons, underneath the levy records and the coin hoards and the census returns and the ash layers. It is not a historical question. It is a human one. What did it feel like? Not politically, not economically, not archaeologically. To the person in the village, in the sept, in the queue, in the schoolroom when the lesson was interrupted and not resumed. What did it feel like to be that person? And 6 scholars, with 6 disciplines between them, have spent this episode circling that question, without being able to answer it.
Archaeology cannot recover memory. I can tell you that a community existed here. I can date it, characterize it, describe its material culture with considerable precision. I can tell you that it ended. I cannot tell you what it felt like to be the last person to leave. I cannot tell you what they took with them and why, or what they left and why. Those are not archaeological questions. They are human questions. And human questions are not always answerable. That is not a failure of archaeology. It is the limit of what physical evidence can carry.
Military history is very good at explaining why things happened the way they did at the strategic and operational level. I can account for every major engagement of the dance in terms of force deployment and decision-making. What I cannot account for is the conscript who was handed a spear and told to hold a road. I do not have his name. I do not have his account of what happened on that road. I have the outcome of the engagement he participated in. That is not the same thing. I have spent my career on the thing that is not the same thing.
Economic history works with aggregates, levy rates, collection percentages, trade volume. These are real. They describe real conditions that affected real lives, but they describe those lives from the outside and from above. The record I work with knows that 40% of expected grain was collected in the Riverlands in 13 AC. It does not know which family ate and which did not. It does not know the name of the child who was hungry. I can tell you the system failed. I cannot tell you who the system failed first. And the order matters. The order is the whole story. The order is what I do not have.
Political history works with the record of power. The record of power is extensive, detailed, and deliberately constructed by people who understood that records matter, which means that political history is always, to some degree, the history of what powerful people wanted remembered. The small folk did not curate their own record. They were curated by others, for administrative purposes, for census, for tax, for conscription. The record knows they existed. It does not know who they were. I have been saying this for my entire career. I do not think I have found a way to fix it. I think it may not be fixable.
Social history tries to recover the experience of people the other disciplines cannot reach. I have been doing this for 15 years, and I want to be honest about what that means in practice. It means inference. It means reading absence as evidence. It means treating the gap in the record as data. And sometimes that is enough. Sometimes the inference is solid and the picture that emerges is real and true. But there are moments in this research, and the dance is full of them, where the gap is just a gap, where the absence is just absence, where the person is simply not there, and I cannot reconstruct them, and nobody can. Those are the hardest moments. Not because they are surprising, because I keep hoping they won't be.
The population of the Seven Kingdoms did not return to its pre-dance level for approximately 40 years. A child born in 131 AC, the year the war ended, would grow up, have children of their own, and those children would be grown before the world their grandparents had known was whole again. They did not experience this as recovery. They had no memory of what had been lost. For them, this was simply the world. Smaller, quieter, with gaps in it that nobody mentioned, because nobody alive remembered what had filled them.
Recovery is not the same as restoration. I want to be precise about this distinction because it matters enormously. The Seven Kingdoms recovered. Things were built. People were born. Life continued. Trade resumed. The faith held services. Lords collected levies. All of this is true. But the communities that were destroyed in the dance were not restored. What came after was different. It was alive and it was real and it mattered, but it was not the same thing. The wool and cloth route that Althorpe traces, it never came back. A different route, serving different towns, trading different goods, emerged later. That is not restoration. That is replacement. And replacement is not nothing, but it is not the same as having the thing you lost.
The 40 years of recovery were not uniform. Some places came back quickly, towns on major river routes, settlements with natural defensive advantages, communities with enough surviving institutional memory to rebuild around. Others did not. The Riverlands, in particular, shows in the archaeological and documentary record a pattern of what scholars call shifted settlement. Communities that did not rebuild where they had been, but displaced slightly, recentering around new wells, new roads, new lords. The old village site still visible a half-mile away. The new village not knowing it was a replacement.
The shifted settlement pattern is one of the most distinctive post-war archaeological signatures in the Riverlands material. You find the original site, datable, characterizable, ending abruptly in a disruption layer. And then, within a half-mile radius, you find a new site, beginning from scratch, showing no material continuity with the original. Different pottery, different building techniques, different spatial organization. These are not the same community in a new location. These are new communities who settled near the ruins of communities they may not have known existed. The ground remembers. The people standing on it do not.
There is a particular kind of site that archaeologists working on the Donce encounter more than any other. Not the burned sites, where at least the fire left a record. Not the shifted settlements, where at least something came back nearby. The sites that were simply abandoned and never reoccupied. A community that dispersed, whose members went elsewhere or nowhere, and left behind a set of foundations that no one subsequently built on. No ash layer, no replacement. Just the outline of walls in the grass, and then nothing above them.
The archaeology of nothing is the hardest archaeology there is. When a community burns, it leaves an ash layer. When it is replaced, it leaves a replacement. When it is simply abandoned, when the people leave and no one comes back, it leaves the absence of what you would expect to find. The walls in the grass, the empty midden, the well with no subsequent use layer. You are reading negative space. You are inferring a community from the evidence that a community was there and is no longer. I have excavated sites like this, and I have found myself on some of them simply stopping. Not because the evidence ran out, because there is a point at which the absence is so complete that the professional distance becomes very difficult to maintain. I am telling you this because I think it is important that someone say it.
I want to go back to the question I asked in episode 1. What did ordinary people think was happening to them? In their own terms, in the framework they had. I have spent 2 more episodes looking for an answer, and I have not found one that satisfies me. What I have found is evidence that the question was asked, in confessional records, in the form of donations made to septs in the aftermath, that suggest people were trying to settle a spiritual account they felt they owed. But the content of that asking is almost entirely lost. The question survives. The answer does not. I do not know if that is the saddest thing in this record, or the most honest thing. I have been trying to decide for several years. I am still trying.
The ground beneath is still there. Every site that was abandoned, every village whose name persists and whose community does not. Every field that went fallow and came back as something different. The ground does not remember in any sense we can access. It holds the evidence, the ash layers, the coin hoards, the outline of walls in the grass. But it does not know what any of it meant to the people who left it there. That knowledge left with them. What was it like? We have the record of what happened. We have the ash layers and the levy accounts and the census margins and the theology and the military doctrine and the political logic. We have all of it. We have everything except the answer to the one question that would make all of it matter. What was it like to be the person it happened to?